Hi, my name is Pat, and this is my channel, Book Chat with Pat, and I'm glad that you're here. Today, I'm bringing you episode 8 in my series on books I loved to teach. And today, I'm going to be speaking about Kate Chopin's short story, The Story of an Hour, and her novel, The Awakening. These are works that I taught in a variety of courses over my long career, but most recently in Advanced Placement English Literature. Very early in the course, AP English Literature, I would introduce Kate Chopin's short story, The Story of an Hour. This is a very short story. It's only about 2 to 3 pages long, but it packs a powerful punch, and it's a great story for teaching the literary device of irony. The Story of an Hour is a short story about the thoughts and feelings of a woman after she is told that her husband has died in a train accident. The story first appeared in Vogue magazine in 1894. Today, it is considered one of Chopin's most popular works. The narrative follows our main character, Louise Mallard, a woman, we're told, who suffers from a weak heart. So she has some kind of a heart condition. And when she receives this terrible news, everyone is very worried about what's going to happen to her heart. So she gets the news of her husband's death in a railroad accident, and she is initially overwhelmed by grief, and she runs upstairs away from everyone else and locks herself in her room. Her emotional journey then takes a very unexpected turn, where she suddenly goes from crying uncontrollably to suddenly contemplating new feelings that she's never had before, because she suddenly is overcome by this newfound sense of freedom and independence upon hearing that her husband has died in this accident. The story unfolds within the confines of Mrs. Mallard's home, and we see basically what society's expectations are, and also the limited roles available to women. As the protagonist, Louise, experiences this wide range of emotions within the course of 1 hour, Kate Chopin is able to very skillfully explore themes of female identity and roles in society, society's constraints on women in particular, and simply the complexities of marriage. After reading and studying this short story, I would then introduce the novel, The Awakening, which deals with many of the same themes and social concerns. The Awakening is Kate Chopin's novel about a married woman named Edna Pontellier, who seeks, in the course of the novel, greater personal freedom and a more fulfilling life than she's currently finding in her marriage. When the novel first appeared in 1899, it was initially condemned. It was described as morbid, vulgar, and disagreeable in early reviews. But today, it is acclaimed as a great work of literature, as an American classic, and as a very early feminist novel. Edna Pontellier is a wife and mother who feels somewhat trapped in what is basically an unfulfilling marriage. At the novel's opening, she clearly loves her family, especially her two sons, her children, but she doesn't feel fulfilled in life. She is spending the summer on a vacation, a summer-long vacation on the community island of Grand Isle on the Gulf of Mexico. She becomes aware on this vacation of two distinct types of women, and she doesn't feel like she fits into either class. Her best friend on the island is Adele Ratignolle, who is what Edna comes to call a mother woman. Adele is completely devoted to her family. She has multiple children, and she is currently expecting another child. Her entire life revolves around the care of her husband and her children. In marked contrast to Adele Ratignolle is Mademoiselle Rice, who is a single woman and a pianist of extraordinary talent. As Edna studies these two women, she comes to see Mademoiselle Rice as what she calls the artist woman, a type of woman who is able to devote herself to her craft. She can devote all of her time and energy to her art without having to give any of her energies to any other demands. She clearly doesn't meet society's expectations for a woman, but Edna finds this life of the artist woman, to be particularly compelling. Through much of the beginning of the novel, Edna spends her time with Adele, her closest friend, and Adele continually reminds her, in a kind way, of her duties as a wife and a mother. Early on, Edna forms a friendship with a young man who kind of prides himself on being very flirtatious and having these ongoing flirtations with married women, flirtations that he doesn't ever expect to go anywhere. But he takes on such a flirtation with Edna, and soon we learn that these two are falling in love. Once that happens, Robert Lebrun takes off. He leaves because he is terrified of doing anything that could potentially upset Edna's marriage. So he flees to Mexico under the guise of pursuing some kind of a business venture. But actually, he just wants to get away from her before they both get into trouble. The narrative focus then moves to Edna's shifting emotions. She hasn't really strayed outside of her marriage, but she has felt things that she had never felt before. And something has awakened in her, and while she's trying to be a good wife and mother, she is also feeling this compelling drive for more freedom. When the summer ends, the Pontelliers go back to their home in New Orleans, and Edna finds that she simply can't forget the things that were awakened in her during the summer. A whole lot of things happen that I'm not going to go into, but she finds herself at a certain point being left home alone. her husband has called in a doctor to check out, to check her out and find out what's wrong with her. And she's being, she's in danger of being labeled, hysterical and all kinds of things. But basically, the doctor tells her husband, leave her be. She'll be okay. She'll come around. The husband is nervous. He removes the children from the home and sends them to live with his parents, and that actually leaves Edna with more freedom. Edna ends up taking up life for a short period of time in a bungalow back on the coast, and she decides that she is going to lead the life of an artist woman. Now, in some ways, this is completely absurd. It's totally absurd because she's not an artist woman. She has some skill as a painter. She has been told that she has some talent, although the portraits that she paints of her friends don't actually end up looking like her friends. So she has some skill, but she's hardly what anyone would call an artist or an artist woman. While she is living in this bungalow and trying to take on this life as an artist woman, she begins an affair, not with Robert, with someone else that she meets. A very persistent suitor who is basically well known as a womanizer. Is a person of a very bad reputation. But what we begin to see is that while this relationship is also not fulfilling to Edna, it does awaken in her certain feelings that she hasn't allowed herself to have. This episode is what has caused the novel, or did cause the novel back in the, at the turn of the century, to be considered dangerous and vulgar. At this time, Edna also reaches out to her friend, Mademoiselle Rice, the artist woman, to find out, how she can live a life more like Mademoiselle Rice. Edna had been very deeply moved by Mademoiselle Rice's piano playing during the summer, and she wants to have a life more like Mademoiselle Rice. She does not encourage Edna. In fact, she warns her that she may not have what it takes. She is concerned that Edna does not have what she calls the courageous soul or strong enough wings to lead the life that Mademoiselle Rice is leading as an artist woman. We also find out at this time that Mademoiselle Rice has been in touch with Robert, who has fled to Mexico. And through these letters that have been exchanged, we find out that Robert does still harbor feelings for Edna. And Edna is led to believe that he does have feelings for her as well. Without talking about too many more details of the novel's plot, and especially how this all plays out, I will say that the ending of the novel is extremely controversial. And since the novel was written and throughout its history, it is this ending that has been sort of up for discussion. And it was what I would ultimately focus my class discussion on and students' writing assignments. There is a very controversial ending, which some critics find very disappointing, especially modern critics, because they say that it simply fits the Victorian era model, where the woman who dares to try to express herself or who dares to follow passion, especially outside of marriage, must suffer some kind of horrible retribution. So some critics find the ending of this novel to be much like, say, the ending of Madame Bovary, Tess of the D'Urbervilles, George Eliot's The Mill on the Floss. All of these are novels where a woman is punished in a horrible way at the end of the novel because she has dared to express herself beyond the confines of her marriage. So many critics say, how could a book that was about a woman's awakening, about a woman finding independence, how could Kate Chopin have had it end in a disturbing way where it appears that the woman is suffering some kind of divine retribution? Almost like cosmic retribution. Others, however, see something else in the end of the novel. Others read the ending, which I'm not going to discuss in any kind of detail. Others see it as actually very hopeful and as suggesting that Edna ultimately gains independence and autonomy. Some see in the ending a kind of rebirth, even a cleansing, an embracing of new possibilities. So I would always have my students, after we had read, analyzed, and discussed the whole novel, I would have them make their own determination on the ending of the novel. And they would, have to find textual evidence in the story to support whichever view they had about the ending. And there could be other views too, but those are the two primary ones. So after a close analysis of the text, I would have students support their position in an essay. It would make for great discussion and debate and ultimately very convincing writing. Interestingly, the questions that this novel opens up would often stay with my students long after we had moved on from the novel. And I just wanted to, before I close, I wanted to share something that happened not too long ago with a former student of mine who reached out to me. We're talking about like some 35 years after she was my student. And she sent me the most beautiful letter. But in that letter, she talked about this writing assignment. She talked about the awakening and the effects of thinking about this deeply and writing about it. So I just wanted to talk about that briefly. This was a student who I had, when I received the letter, I had her about 35 years before the writing of that letter. I was a very young teacher at that time, and this young woman is now a very accomplished writer herself. And she is a wife and a mother of 3 beautiful children. She wrote this lovely letter to me after she found me on social media. And her letter was filled with very, very generous comments about the impact of my class on her formation as a reader, a thinker, and a writer. And she wrote about me and also about the woman who was my mentor, who was also this young woman's teacher. So she wrote about how the two of us really shaped her as a reader and a thinker and a writer. So, curiously, in her letter, she wrote about the awakening, about reading The Awakening and writing about it with me long ago. Now, this is a woman who went on to Yale after high school, and she would then earn a graduate degree as well. Again, she's a professional writer today. She wrote specifically about learning to read with my mentor and with me. She said that she never again had a teacher like us, a teacher who, quote, made the books matter to me as much as you did. She went on to describe how she would remember me especially and our study of The Awakening in particular. And she said she thinks about it every summer at her husband's family's summer house on a lake in upper New York State. And she wrote, quote, "We go up there every summer, and every year I try to swim across the lake, and I never make it. But while I'm swimming, I always think about Edna Pontellier and the wings that she had to grow, and the end of the awakening, and whether or not she kept swimming and made it to the other side, and how you made me back up my assumption that she did make it with textual evidence." She went on to say that her eldest was about to start school, and that while she was very nervous about sending him off into the world, she dared to hope that he might encounter a teacher who would impact his life as my mentor and I had impacted hers. I was quite simply left speechless by this very beautiful letter. And it reinforced for me this idea that making challenging books available to kids and teaching kids to read these complex books, to analyze them, and to respond thoughtfully to literature in discussion and in writing is absolutely critical work, and it is absolutely essential for the future of our society. And it just did my heart good to hear from this superstar. So that's another book, The Awakening. It's another book that I loved to teach in my long career as a high school English teacher. I want to wish everyone a happy new year. I wish you all good things in 2025. I thank you for watching. I hope that you're doing well. I'll speak with you again soon. Take care.